Wet cough.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be dry.
All right, I'm going to mute all of them.
What's up, bro?
What's up? Jelly, what's up?
That's
I think
funny.
I'm going to mute all of you.
Should I get it and just start picking up the ball and sitting in the middle of the screen?
Okay. All right, so I think I've muted all of you. I see some of you have your video up, some don't. That's okay. Essentially what we'll do is try to get together every week at the beginning of the week. I'm hoping Monday works for you. I know some of your other classes are also having you get online. So if we run into too much trouble, we'll go back to using our regular class time. And that way we'll make sure we don't bump into anybody else's class. But if we can get it at noon, I think it would be better for all of us, right? It'll get it in the middle of the day. So I'm recording this meeting. If for some reason you can't make it to a meeting on Monday, you can always watch the recording after. I'm going to try to keep the discussions fairly short and concise. And then you'll notice that I already posted 4 videos on the SitLearn, and each video is a tab on the homework. So you can work through each video, complete that tab, and then go to the next video and complete that tab. So again, trying to keep the videos short, keep the assignments clear, and walk you through what you have to get done for the week. So in this lesson, I'm just going to give you an overview of the content and talk to you about the various activities you have to get engaged with. Do you have any questions before I get started?
Yeah, where did you say all that stuff was?
It's on SitLearn.
Okay, thank you.
So I'll hop on, after I get done with this presentation, I'll hop on SitLearn and I'll go over there and show you where everything is. Okay, so the first week will probably be the most confusing for you after you get in the rhythm. You know how it goes. It's almost like starting the semester over. So after a week goes by and you get in the rhythm of everything, you'll be okay. Have you ever used Zoom before? No? All right, you'll like it. It's a great program, right? All right, so in this lesson, we're going to pick up where we left off, and we're going to start digging in deeper in terms of the costs that have been incurred, and we're going to look at how they behave. And what I mean by that is how they change relative to changes in activity. So we're going to be looking at that for 2019 again. All right, so I got 4 learning objectives, 4 goals for us. This is for this week. So the first thing that you'll tackle is getting your mind wrapped around what happens to the bottom line when I change price. And what happens to the bottom line if I change the cost? Oops, sorry. I change the cost. So we'll focus on the impact on, let's say, the income statement if we tinker with the price of a cup of coffee, or if we tinker with the cost of a baked item. And so we'll be looking at how the costs behave in relation to making those types of decisions, right? So you want to, it's like you're trying something to see what's going to happen to the financial results. So if you increase price, do things look better or worse? Because sometimes an increase in price will reduce volume, right? You see where I'm going with that? So you've got to be able to gauge what is the impact of these types of decisions that I make on the bottom line. So that's what I mean by this first learning objective here. All right, so to do that, to be able to answer those types of questions, you got to first do this. You got to define the various types of costs. So we call them fixed costs or variable costs or mixed costs. You got to be able to do that. So when you see a particular cost, you can say right off the bat, okay, this is how this cost is going to behave, and that's going to drive the answer to the question that I pose back here. So if I change price, what happens to the bottom line? If I change cost, what happens to the bottom line? That's all going to depend on the type of behavior or the pattern that you see over different levels of activity. So this is what you're going to work on mostly, is sorting this out. And we use 2 methods. So to make this happen, we use the high-low method. So I'll show you how to do that, and the linear regression method. The linear regression method is the best method to use, and the high-low method is the easiest method to use. So I want to show you both. And then once you get that figured out, once we work through this, we'll do this about 10 times, so you get the hang of it. Then you create a model based on the answers you got here for determining the total cost and then for future budgeting and forecasting. So this week, we're really just setting things up so that we can answer these types of questions next week. So I want you to think about this week and next week as kind of being a continuation of the lesson, similar to what we did when we did 5A and 5B. This is 6A. And so we're just laying the groundwork so that next week you can start answering these types of questions. I'm going to show you what some of those questions look like, but that's just an overview of what we have to do this week. All right, so here's your tasks. Like I said, there's short video lessons related to the homework assignment. You'll see one for every tab on the spreadsheet, so you can work through them slowly. Make sure you start with task 1. So you can't do task 3 until you've done tasks 1 and 2. Does that make sense? Like, don't jump around in the assignment. Make sure you go through task 1, task 2, task 3. All right, so there's 6 of them for this week. And then if you could get that assignment done for me by Wednesday night, let's shoot for that. Get that done by Wednesday midnight. And then I have a really short quiz. It's a 9-question quiz that comes right off the study sheet. I'll show you where that is. It's on SitLearn. And then the only other thing you have to do is post one short answer discussion question and an answer to someone else's question. All right, so really this is where the bulk of your work's going to be. Right here is doing this homework assignment. This won't take you any time at all. Short, sweet little quiz. And these are pretty short too.
Is that quiz due Wednesday or Thursday?
Thursday.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
All right.
Thursday the 26th, Dr. Wright?
Say again?
You have
It says the 25th, Dr. Wright.
Oh, yeah. That should be the 26th.
Thank you.
That's right. Good catch. Yeah, same as this one, Thursday. All right, so here's some of those questions I was talking to you about. And again, we're just kind of laying the groundwork this week. And these are the types of questions you're going to answer next week, but they're all interconnected. So for instance, how many months of the year does it take before we break even? And so when I say break even, what do you think of? What's that make you think of?
Make enough money to cover your expenses.
Yeah, you got to cover your expenses. So what's profit at break even?
Whatever you have left after you pay expenses.
So what would profit be?
0.
0, right. Does that make sense? So how many months of the year does it take us before we break even? We cover all of our costs. And to answer that question, you've got to sort out the costs. And so that's what I meant by that cost behavior and the cost patterns. You got to sort that out. Here's another question we're going to look at answering. If we increase price, what happens to the bottom line? And another one, if we decrease costs, what happens to the bottom line? Here's a more complicated question. If sales drop by 20%, are we still profitable? And the last one is, how many units do we need to sell to make a 20% profit margin? So these are the types of questions that businesses generally would ask, right? So they're interested in the answers to these questions. And in order to get the answers to those questions, you need to go through the process of sorting out the costs. So that's where we're headed this week. And then next week, we'll tackle some of this stuff. All right, so we talk about costs. So I want to highlight this cost, C, our costs. They can be managed over the long term, right? So all of them can be managed over the long term. Some of them can't be changed in the short term. So for instance, let's say we want to move to a bigger building. That's a huge decision. Right, so say we want to have more tables in the cafe, or we want to be able to add a second roaster and we don't have room for it. That's a major decision, and that's going to take some time for us to execute. Other decisions are easy for us to make. So in this current crisis, this is a perfect example. You see a lot of businesses laying people off, closing down their short-term operations, at least for a little while, we hope. And some of those things are much easier for a firm to make in the short term. So I want you to be thinking about that as we're going through this, because when you sort it out, time matters. So for instance, we're going to say, let's say the depreciation on the building is a fixed cost, right? So that's a long-term fixed cost, and it's not easy for us to change that number in the short term. Whereas let's say part-time people who are working in the restaurant, we can easily let them go. I mean, I don't mean that that it's easy to fire people, but it's easier for us to make that decision and get a result from it than it is for us to, let's say, change depreciation on a building by selling the building and buying a new building. All right, so you have to look at these costs in terms of the impact and the length of time in which they can be managed. So this will make more sense as we move into the material. So volume changes is another way, another thing we need to consider. So remember when we talked to the owner of this business, they have excess capacity. So if we want to expand the business, that's going to be easy for us to do, right? If we have excess capacity. If we don't have excess capacity, then some of these decisions don't matter, right? Some of them just won't matter. Price changes, again, if we can change price, what's the impact on the bottom line? And a lot of that's going to depend on the price elasticity of demand. So for instance, if there's a Dunkin' Donuts just around the corner from us and we try to increase our price and now we're more expensive than they are, then we might lose sales. So you might think initially increasing price is going to help us, but not if we lose a lot of volume. And so that's what we mean by price elasticity. Do you remember the difference between elastic demand and inelastic demand from your economics class? Does anybody remember that?
Oh,
Isn't it just the time frame?
No.
inelastic is like you gotta buy it. It's like a necessity. You're gonna buy it. Like law of demand doesn't really apply.
All right, so give me an example of a product that has inelastic demand.
Gasoline.
Okay, yeah. So cigarettes would be another one. It's a very common one that we talk about. Right, so if we increase the price on a pack of cigarettes, does it change the volume that we sell by a lot? Probably not, right? So we say it's inelastic. It doesn't respond to the change in the price. For a coffee company, do you think their demand is elastic or inelastic?
Inelastic.
Yeah, it's probably pretty elastic, meaning that there's a lot of close substitutes that if our price gets too high, people will switch, right? So we have to keep some of that in mind when we go to analyze changes in price. So we call this CVP analysis. These are the various things that we're going to consider as we try to make these types of decisions. Okay, so here's these costs. There's three major types. Fixed cost, here's your definition. It's a cost that remains unchanged over the relevant range, so we got to define that, of an underlying activity level. So this is a short-term definition, meaning that the cost is fixed over the short term. So you have to look at it that way. So the relevant range would be the range of activity that we've budgeted for, let's say, the last 12 months, so the short term. Okay. Examples would be depreciation, especially straight line depreciation, which is what most companies use. 90% of all companies use straight line for financial reporting. Salaries that are paid to usually the managers are considered fixed costs. Not wages paid to part-time people though. So what I'm focusing on there is salaries that are paid to managers. So you get an annual salary. Property taxes in the short term are fixed costs. Nothing you can do about that in the short term. Insurance is generally a fixed cost, and some level of your utility bill. So everybody pays a hookup charge to have utilities. Even if you don't turn on the lights, you still have to pay a hookup charge. So in the short term, that's also considered fixed, right? Versus variable. So let's compare. Variable, the definition here is a cost that changes in, direct proportion to a change in the underlying activity level. All right, so these are costs that are much easier for us to manage in the short term. So for instance, the cost of the materials. So if the coffee shop is shut down, do they need to buy green beans? Probably not. Okay. If the coffee shop is shut down, do they need to pay for the people to roast the coffee? Probably not.
No.
So these are costs that are discretionary in a sense, that if you're not operating, you wouldn't incur these costs. So if volume was zero, if you weren't selling anything, the cost would be zero. As opposed to these costs, when volume is zero, you still incur these. So if you think about that business right now, they're probably shut down. They're a restaurant. So they're probably shut down. But they're still incurring these types of costs here, right? They still have to pay their property tax. They still have to pay insurance. They still own the building. So they're depreciating the building. They still own the equipment. They're depreciating the equipment. But these kinds of costs, they probably stopped spending money on this. Another one's part-time wages or commissions and some of your overhead costs. So for instance, the coffee company buys the bags and the labels for the bags. When they package up the roasted beans, they're probably not buying any more of those right now. And so that's how you sort out and start to understand the various cost behaviors. And we need to do this because to be able to make those decisions I threw at you earlier, like what's the impact of changing price? What's the impact of changing cost? It depends on these things. And so it depends on what your total fixed costs are. Because you got to sell enough volume to be able to cover these during the year, right? You got to cover these fixed costs. And these costs are going to vary with sales. So this is not as important as these in terms of covering those costs. Then some costs have components of both, right? So they have components that are fixed and have components that are variable. If you look at your internet bill, there's a certain portion of that bill that everybody pays. And then there's some discretionary amounts on top of that. So depending on what speed you want and so on and so forth. So there's like a hookup charge that's fixed. And then there's a variable component that's based on whatever package. Utilities is the same way. There's a base amount that you pay. Everybody pays the same fee. And then you pay based on the number of kilowatt hours that you burn up during the month. So there's a variable part and a fixed part. And most of the costs that we look at contain elements of both. And you're going to see that as we go through the homework assignment, that when you analyze the costs and you try to break them down into these components, most of them have pieces of both. Okay. So how do we do that? Usually the way I'm going to have you do it for the homework assignment is we create scattered graphs from past data and activity levels. So on the x-axis of that graph, we'll have the level of volume, so the number of units sold. And on the y-axis, we'll have whatever cost we're analyzing. We'll take each one at a time. So we'll start with cost of goods sold, then we'll do payroll, then we'll do utilities, then we'll do supplies. So we do it about 10 times. So you get to create about 10 graphs from the data. And again, I'm going to show you, we're going to have 12 months of data. So you can analyze the pattern. So here's an example of one. This is insurance. So if you look at the x-axis down here, you've got volume. And if you look at the y-axis, this is dollars. Okay. So they're always set up like that. The volume is going to be the same on each one of these. So if you look at this dot, the highest dot, meaning the highest volume, and this one, the lowest volume, that area between them is your relevant range. And there's 12 dots there. and each dot represents a month. So if you're looking at that, how would you classify that? Is that a fixed cost or a variable cost?
Fixed.
Fixed cost.
It's fixed. How do you know it's
Fixed
fixed?
cost.
Yeah. So it's fixed. How do you know it's fixed?
Because it's all.
Because it stays the same.
Y equals 30.
Yes, y equals 30. So no matter what volume we're at, we're going to pay how much in insurance every month?
30. 30.
Yeah. Okay.
$30.
It's that simple. So again, we create these scatter graphs, and then we plot the 12 months of data and look at the pattern. If you see the pattern is horizontal like this, immediately recognize it's a fixed cost, meaning that the dollar amount doesn't change no matter what level of activity we're at. All right, let's look at another one. All right, so same range of volume. So we're looking at the same 12-month period. You got 12 dots that are representing 12 months. And your formula says y equals 0.0031x. And r squared is 1, meaning that this particular line is completely linear and all the points are on the line. Okay, so when you have complete linear relationship with all the data points, you get an r squared of 1. If some of these dots are falling off the line, let's say they're up above the line or some are below the line, which can easily happen. You'll see some examples like that. Then the r squared would be less than 1. So the only time you're going to get an r squared equal to 1 is when all the dots line right up perfectly, just like this. All right, so what would you say about this cost? Does it vary with volume or is it fixed?
Variable cost.
Okay, how do you know it's strictly variable and not mixed? Because I said mixed could contain elements of both. How do you know
It's
there's
not
no?
bouncing up and down, maybe.
Because of the straight line.
No?
The equation,
How do you know from the equation?
because it's only equals 0.0031. It's not adding anything.
All right, so what's the equation for a straight line?
Wouldn't it just be 0 since it's not changing?
Let me put this chat box up. Do you remember this? Do
One, or yeah, it would be 0, right?
you remember this equation?
Y equals mx. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. But
All
it's
right,
not adding anything.
That's the exact same thing we're doing. So what's M stand for?
The slope.
Right, so is 0.0031 the slope?
Yes.
Yes, and X represents what? Whatever volume we're at, true? Whatever volume we're at. Do you have a B in this case?
No.
No. What do you suppose, from your equation, what do we reference B as? What's it called?
So y-intercept?
Yes, the y-intercept. So if there isn't one, what's implied? B equals what?
0.
0.
Yeah, does that make sense? So in
Yes.
other words, if we took this line using the slope that we have there and we drew it all the way back, where would it hit?
0.
Mm-hmm.
It hits 0.
All right, so that's what a variable, 100% variable cost is going to look like that. It's going to have an intercept of 0. So let's make sure you're catching on here. Y equals total cost that's on this axis, true?
Yep.
Okay. And X equals total volume, which is on this axis, true?
Mm-hmm.
Total volume. Okay, M equals the slope on this line, which we're going to use to represent the variable cost because it varies with volume. Do you agree?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and B we're going to use to represent the fixed cost because B is the intercept. So in this particular case, there is no fixed element when it comes to the supplies. Okay?
Yes.
All right, let's go back for a second. I want to go back to the previous slide. There's the insurance expense. So using that formula, is there any slope or any impact on the total cost from a change in X?
No, because there's no slope.
Yeah,
Right,
no.
so this falls out and you're only left with
The plus B, so like
Yeah.
the Y.
Inter-
Yeah.
right, so this represents intercept. You good with that?
Yes.
So B equals 30, right?
Yes.
And M equals 0. True?
True.
All right, so I just gave you examples of both fixed and variable. Let's look at a mixed. So this is cost of goods sold. Slide that over here. Cost of goods sold, here's your formula. Y, so total cost of goods sold is Y, equals 7.7857X plus 5,230 bucks roughly. R squared is 1, meaning that every single dot falls on the line. It's a perfectly linear positive correlation. Okay, so talk to me about it. What's this mean?
There's a B value.
Uh-huh, there is. And is there an M value too?
Yes.
There's both.
Yes.
Okay, so talk to me about this first, the M value. The slope is variable costs. So what's it saying? That for every 1 unit that I sell, total cost of goods sold goes up by how much?
7.785.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, and then fixed costs. So even if I don't sell anything, so if volume is 0, the intercept's going to be at 5,000 right in here somewhere. 5,230 bucks. So no matter what, I'm going to incur that cost. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So there's some costs that are incurred that I'm going to have to suck up whether or not I'm operating or not. In today's environment, this is so easy to teach because you really catch on. Everyone's shut down. So what we would say is, well, I'm going to have fixed costs of at least $5,000, even if I'm not making and selling anything. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's going to be really
Yeah, it's still gonna
important.
be there.
People are going to have to figure out how much money do I need right now to get by, given that I have no sales. And the only way to have an understanding of that is to understand what your fixed costs are. And so that's why we need to go through this process to separate these pieces so that then I can total up all of my costs. And that's exactly what you're going to do in this assignment. You're going to total up all your fixed costs, all your variable costs, and figure out what your cost structure is. It's pretty cool. Okay. All right, so how do we do it? I just showed you the scatter graph approach, which is really linear regression. So I just showed you how to use the scatter graph. There's another technique that you can use too that's easier than getting into Excel. I call it back of the envelope calculation. And what it does is it uses 2 data points. So we have 12 points. It uses the highest point and the lowest point. And then you draw a straight line between the high and the low. And you figure out what the rise over the run is, the slope. And you figure out what the fixed cost is using the same equation, using this equation. Except the only difference is, so the difference between this and this is the high-low method only uses 2 points and linear regression uses all the points. Okay, so linear regression is the better method. Sorry, it keeps doing that to me. Linear regression is the better method because it uses all of the points. But you do need Excel to do it because it's a real pain to do it by hand. Now, if you've ever done in your stats class, did you have to do linear regression by hand? I hope not, but if you did, it's quite tedious. Right? Whereas this one is super easy because you're really only dealing with 4 dollar amounts, and you use the rise, the difference between the dollar amounts. Let me go back to a graph so you can see what I'm talking about. So you'd use this one on the bottom, which is coupled with this dollar amount. So there's $2 or 2 values there, the quantity and the dollar amount. And you use this one up here, the highest quantity. So you use this quantity here and this dollar amount that matches to that point. And you ignore everything in the middle. Okay, so for high-low method, you just use this one and this one. You draw a pretend line between them, which in fact would be the same as this. And you calculate the slope and you calculate the intercept using this formula. So it's very similar. In fact, if R squared is 1, the high-low method and linear regression will give you the exact same answer. If R squared is less than 1, which can happen easily, where these points are kind of scattered in a cluster, they're not right on the line, but they're in a cluster. If R squared is less than 1 and that happens, then the high-low method will give you a different answer because it's drawing a straight line between the low and the high, whereas linear regression is giving you a straight line between the points. And it may not line up with the low and the high. It may be a different slope. Okay. Okay, so again, just some of the pros with high-low, easy to do. We could do it on the back of an envelope without even a calculator. It's so easy to do. It does split the cost for me. So it splits them into fixed and variable, which is what I need to do. The con is that it only uses 2 data points. So it's not using everything to come up with an answer. And if the low and the high are outliers, it may be giving me a false reading. Right? Because again, I'm only using the high and the low. So it's maybe not very precise. The linear regression uses all the data points. It is very precise. It's as precise as we can get. It's easy to do in Excel. It takes all of about 30 seconds. It's hard to do on paper. It's a real pain because you have to calculate the differences between every data point and the mean. And you have to go through a whole bunch of reiterations of that. It's a real pain. So you do need software and you need a little bit of statistical expertise. Not a lot, little. You need to understand what R squared is. So R squared is a goodness of fit. Let's talk about it one more time. R squared is a goodness of fit. How well do these points fit that line? So these points fit that line perfect. So you're going to get the best, highest value. Do you remember what the range of values is for R squared? What can it run between? Type it in the chat box. R squared can take a value between what and what? That's the correlation coefficient. That's the correlation coefficient, which is just R. What you're giving me there is R. What's R squared? There you go. Okay, good. All right, so it can take a value between 0 and 1. So if it is 1, that's the highest possible value it can be. That means every single dot lines up on the line, which is what we see in this case. If these dots you see here, any of them, it could be the high and the low too. If they're not on the line, the best fitting line for the data points, then R squared will be less than 1. So if you end up with a whole bunch of dots all over this page, your R squared is probably going to be close to 0. Does that make sense? If the data is all over the place, then basically what it's saying is your model stinks, all right? Like it's not a good model. This is telling you this model is awesome because everything's lining right up on it. So if I want to predict what costs are going to be at, let's say, 4,000 units, how would I do that? How would I predict what the total cost would be? So what's Y, total cost of goods sold, at 4,000 units? How would I do that? Okay, John says make X 4,000. Does everybody agree?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So in this model, I would have a lot of faith in that answer. So if we substitute 4,000 in for X, we run this out, we get an answer. I'd have a lot of faith in that answer. And I'd be comfortable using it in developing a budget, which you're going to do in a few weeks. So we're going to keep building on using these formulas, and you're going to use them to build a budget. And you got to think about, is the model reasonable? So is this a good model for me to use to build a budget? How much faith do I have in my estimates? And I'd have a lot of faith in your estimates using an R squared of 1. Right? That's a good model. That equation right there represents what your cost curve is for cost of goods sold. And it's got variable elements. They vary with volume. And it has fixed elements. The intercept, when it hooks up down here, is right around here. And that means I'm going to incur that level of cost, whether I'm making anything or not. Right? So we're in shutdown mode right now. That's what I'm going to incur for cost. Okay, so if federal government comes to you and they say, we're willing to give you a grant to cover your base costs, you got to be able to pull that number out, right? Small businesses are going to need it. It's going to be crazy. All right, any questions so far? I know I haven't shown you how to do an example right now. I'm just trying to acquaint you with the terms, give you the general idea of where we're going, and then you'll have that homework assignment to practice. Okay. All right, so once you get all the pieces, I showed you 3. I showed you insurance, I showed you supplies, I showed you cost of goods sold. Once you get them all done, which you're going to do for your homework, you take each of those and you add them all together. So you take all the fixed costs that you got on all those equations that you determined, you add them all up, and you do the same with the variables, which is the slope, the m. You add them all up, and that gives you a total cost equation for the entire firm. So then you can use that, again, to help you project what are my costs going to be given a certain expected level of volume. This is extremely useful for helping us to be able to answer the questions that I threw at you earlier, like what happens if we change price? What happens if we change costs? It's going to depend on which costs, right, are being changed and by how much. Now I've got a tool that I can use, this one right here. This is a tool that I'm going to use to help me with that. The homework assignment is due on Wednesday night. Yep, thanks for answering that question. Perfect. All right, so does that make sense, kind of?
Yeah.
You got to do? All right. Awesome. All right, so once you have all those costs organized into the variable and fixed components, like I said, then you can answer those types of questions. So all we're going to do this week is organize the costs that you have for the coffee company for 2019. So I'm going to show you the Excel file here in a second. You're going to see January, February, March, April, May, June. So I've broken it all down into monthly data. And you're going to be able to do those scatter graphs for each cost. And then next week, I'll have you tackle things like, okay, now that we've got this information, we can figure out what our break-even point is. So for instance, how many pounds of coffee does it take us to break even in the roasting business? And how many months does it take us to get there? Are we breaking even after 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 10 months, right? And that'll help give you a feel for the profitability of the business and risk. Because if it takes a long time to break even, that's a lot riskier than if we can break even before the end of the first quarter, right? So it's important to understand that to help you understand the risk of your business. So that's where we're headed over the next couple of weeks. So let me just recap again. This is what we're going to use this information to explain the impact of how we change price or we change cost and what's the bottom line impact. To do that, you got to sort out the costs into fixed, variable, or mixed. That's what this means. And you do that by using either the high-low method or linear regression. Those are the 2 tools you can use. Linear regression is always better because it uses all the data. It's extremely precise. High-low method has flaws, but it's easy. We could do it at the table in a meeting, which we sometimes want to do. So you'll hear people in industry say back of the envelope calculation, right? And then from these results, we build an entire cost formula, a model that we can use for budgeting and forecasting.
So for this homework, do you want us to use both of those methods or just?
Yeah, I'll show you how that's set up and walk you through it. So when you go to look at the videos I created for the assignment, I walk you through step by step and why you're doing what you're doing. So you'll see me actually fill out the Excel, kind of like we did in class when we walked through an assignment. Just now you can do it on your own. You can do it whenever you want. All right. All right, so one more time, your due dates, let's fix this one. This should be the 26th. So watch those lessons and walk through the various tasks. I got 2 left to do, so I'm gonna do them right after class. I gotta do task 5 and task 6. So the first 4 are already up and ready to go. They're YouTube videos. And then get that homework assignment, if you could, done by Wednesday night, that'd be amazing. And then take the quiz on Thursday, the 26th. And then I'll show you what I mean by this. So we'll go over to the platform right now, and I'll show you what we got. So I got to stop the share on this, and then I'll load that. So give me a second.
Are the quizzes already available to take?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's posted. Okay. How's that visual? Can you see Sit Learn?
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, so under course modules, you go down to lesson 6. So there's your due dates again. Let me switch to student view because my view looks a little different than yours. So yours looks just like this. So here's the slides that I just showed you. If you want to look at those later, you can. So those slides I just went through are right here. And here's the study guide that I would print that off. And I built the quiz right off of that. Okay? So there's that, links to that. Here's the homework assignment. So if we click that, there's the template. Let's open it. And you got to tell me if you can see it, because I might have to stop share and show it to you. So I've got it open right now. Can you see it or no?
No.
No.
Okay. All right, so let me explain how this Zoom works. So you're still seeing Sit Learn, right?
Yes.
All right, so
Yes.
whenever I share my screen with you, which is what I'm doing, it only shares what I shared with you. Like I have to click on it. So I'd have to stop this share and open the Excel file and share that. So if you would just let me get through this part first, and then I'll open the Excel file after I finish showing you around. Okay, so here's task 1 on the Excel template. Can you see the YouTube video? Okay. Well,
Yep.
your first video lesson. Fantastic. So what I do, so that did show.
Yes.
Yes.
Yay. That's good to know. So this is what I do is I show you how to complete the assignment. You're going to see 6 tasks right there. And each video recording is a walkthrough on how to do each tab. So I just do one video for each tab. Does that make sense? You can pause
Yes,
it,
ma'am.
replay it, watch it a second time if you want. I think you're going to like it better than what we do in class because it allows you to kind of go at your own pace and also ask questions. Hang on, somebody just posted something on the chat board. Yep, awesome. All right, so let me go back. Can you see Sit Learn again?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So you see where I got task 2, 3, and 4 listed already? Off on the left there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the second tab on the worksheet, third tab on the worksheet, fourth tab on the worksheet. I got to post 5 and 6 this afternoon. So that's all you got to do over the next couple of days by Wednesday, midnight. So maybe do a couple tabs a day. Each tab should not take you more than 15 minutes. Is that fair?
Yep.
Okay. And then you see the link to your quiz.
Yes.
So if you open that, I give you 2 chances and I'll keep your highest score and you just click that to launch it. Fair?
Yep.
Only 9 questions. And I built it off of this study sheet that's back here. This one. So I would download this and print it so you have it handy for the quiz. Does that make sense?
Is that study guide already filled out or no?
Yeah, it's all done. All right, so then remember you have to post a question. So look here, here's your tasks again. Watch those videos. That's what we're doing right now is the class. Watch the homework learning videos, then complete the assignment, take the short quiz, and post one question and one answer on the discussion board. Okay, so let's look at that.
When do we need to have that posted by?
Those are Thursday to have your question and Friday to have your answer. Okay, so let's look at this one. Post one question and and answer one question. Okay, so you create a thread here. Okay, so you just put, I would put your name. So and then just type a question. So for instance, I would type, what's the definition of a variable cost? Okay. And I post that question. All right, and it shows up. And you get to see anybody else's question at that point. All right, so I did put an example question in already just so you could see it. This one is, what's the definition of a fixed cost? And so if you wanted to answer that question, you just hit reply and you write in the definition that I gave you in the PowerPoint slides, or it's also in that study guide. So you could print off the study guide and do this assignment as well. And the idea here is to get you reading and thinking about the terminology and the questions that are on the study guide.
We have to make sure we ask a question that hasn't been asked.
Well, the way I've got it set up is that you can't really see anybody else's questions until you post. So you just post whatever you want and then let other people hop on. So it's okay if you repeat. Right? I'm hoping we get some variety. We'll see how it goes. If we figure out a better way of doing it, we'll make some changes to this. But the idea is I just want you to be discussing some of the content and going through some of the definitions, kind of like flashcards, right? Here's a question, here's an answer. Keep them short, don't get crazy, right? Simple. So what's the fixed cost? What's the variable cost? What's the mixed cost? What's a pro of the high-low method? What's a pro of linear regression? What's a con of each? You get the idea?
Yes,
What's,
ma'am.
what's the formula for a straight line? What does M mean in the formula for a straight line? What does B mean? B is variable or fixed cost. M is variable or fixed cost. So stuff like that. Just simple little questions that help you roll through this material and kind of have a little conversation with each other about it. And if we can refine this during the rest of the semester, we will. And just keep working on it until it works. So every week, that would be my plan, to have you do one Excel assignment and try to do it by Wednesday night. Have you do one short quiz, no more than 10 questions, give you a couple chances at it. And then have you do one question, one answer on the discussion board. And that would be your weekly assignment. We'll get together every Monday. I'll kind of share with you what you got to do for work. This week's probably the longest class we'll have because I needed to show you around SitLearn and give you an introduction to it. But next week, I imagine it'll go a lot faster because you'll be in the pattern of what we got to do.
So we're only going to meet once a week.
Yep.
Cool. Thanks.
That work?
Yes, ma'am.
Yep.
Yeah.
The other thing you can do with the discussion board is if you have a question as you're proceeding through your homework and you want to float that question, I'm okay with that too. Does that make sense? So say you're working on something, you get stuck and you want to throw that question on there. That's okay too.
Wait, so the question for the homework does count toward our question for the discussion board?
You bet.
Okay, sweet.
So it's really just a place for us to share thoughts and kind of get yourself working on learning. If you do have questions you need really quick answers, because sometimes I only check the discussion board like once or twice a day. So if you want a really quick answer, just email me directly. Don't wait for me to answer your question or wait for somebody else too, right? So just zip me a quick email. I think you're gonna find the videos I created to get you through the homework are really, they answer a lot of your questions.
There's a question in the chat right now about the best way to fill out the study guide.
Oh, you don't have to fill out anything. It's all done.
Oh, sweet.
So the answers are there too?
Yeah,
Oh, sweet.
yeah. It's, you know how I used to, when we were working together face to face, I
like
gave
the
you
big
that,
long Word document.
yeah, I gave you that Word document and you did the stand up
I remember that.
teamwork. It's like that.
Okay.
So instead of having the team just exercise that I gave you, you have a quiz. So that's how I'm replicating that. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
You still have Excel.
Yes, ma'am.
Still have Excel, and your, the videos I created for you for Excel is really your lecture, right? That's filling in for the class discussions. And you've got the quiz that substitutes for the teamwork we were doing, where you answer questions for me. And then the discussion board space is really just for you to start practicing and space to answer questions. You think that'll work?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
If you have any ideas as we're going through that could make things more efficient for you, please share them, right? Because we're all learning how to manage this new environment, right? Yes, so I see a question from 18035, whoever that is. Whoever that is. The
Don't trust
answer
the
is
government
yes.
to give me your real name.
Any other questions? All right, do you want me to show you that Excel file?
Yeah.
Yes.
Just real quick, I'll show you that. Let me stop sharing this and I'll open the Excel. Okay, you see that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, so the videos are going to walk you through what you have to do. It's basically wherever you see yellow, you have to complete. So my video walks you through that. So you notice there's 6 tabs across the bottom. Don't jump, because this tab here depends on what you do here. And this tab here depends on what you do here, and so on. They build. All right, so all you're doing here is figuring out what the extended sales amounts are for each month of 2019. So this is cool, when you think about it, where we've been. Initially, you were looking at 8 years of results. And then the last assignment, we looked at just 2019 and we broke it into segments and we looked at product costs. Now we're taking 2019 and we're drilling down even further and looking at each month. So what's happening over the months? And that way we can do those scatter graphs, because now we've got 12 months worth of data. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Right, so when you get over to this tab, these are going to fill once you complete task 1. These will autofill because they're all formulas. You're going to create a scatter graph, and I show you how to do that in Excel using the data that's right here. So this is going to be your x-axis, this is going to be your y-axis, and then I show you how to do the high-low method down here. So your graph will go right in here. Okay?
So there's videos on how to do all this Excel stuff?
Yep.
All right.
I've got the first 4 done.
Sweet.
After we finish up here, I'm going to finish 5 and 6. And then the third task is where you do what I had mentioned earlier in the PowerPoint presentation. You have to combine all of them. So you take the variable cost of goods sold for high-low. You take the variable cost of goods sold for linear. I show you how to do that in the video. And then when you get done, they all add up right here on this line. So this is automatic formula. And I ask you which method should you use, high, low, or linear. I give you hints and checkpoints and show you how to complete this. So the video walks you through step by step by step how to do it. And that's for roasting, and then you do the same exact thing for the cafe. So I walk you through how to build the graphs. So you're going to get lots of practice doing scatter graphs and creating the data and doing linear regression. Super good practice. And then you pull together all the cafe stuff. And again, the reason we're doing this is because we want to be able to make decisions like, what's our break-even point? And what happens if we increase price? And what happens if we decrease cost? And it all depends on what kind of cost it is and how it behaves. Right? Because it doesn't matter what you do to price, you're not going to change fixed costs in the short term. Does that make sense? That's where we're headed next week. Doesn't matter what you do to price, you will not change fixed costs in the short term. Right? You might be able to change variable costs in the short term, but you're not going to change fixed costs in the short term. Right? So this is part one of kind of a two-part lesson. And that's what we have to do this week. What do you think?
Or it's pretty straightforward.
Feel confident you can get her done?
Yes.
All
If you
right.
have any
I do
questions,
too.
what's
I
the best
think
way
you
to
can do it.
contact with you?
Let me know if you have any questions. Okay.
What's the best way to do that? Through email or?
Yeah. If you have an immediate question you'd like me to answer really quickly, definitely send me an email. And then let me get the chat box open too. I'll send you my phone number. It's in the syllabus, but I'll put it here so you have it easily.
Have you also changed the syllabus to for your office hours for Zoom?
That's a good question. What I'd like to do for office hours is just schedule it with you one-on-one, and we'll get right on Zoom. So I'll send you an invitation to Zoom, and then we'll hop on. And I might record it, so if other students have the same question, then we can share that. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am.
But rather than schedule definite office hours, I'd rather you just give me a shout, either call me, text me. So my phone number is right there in the chat box. Either call me, text me, or email me, and we'll set up a time that works for you. I'm pretty much just working the whole time, so it doesn't really matter to me when.
Sounds good. If that's it, I have another scheduled appointment or scheduled Zoom call at 1 o'clock.
Okay. You got to head out?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I think we're just about wrapped up. Does anyone have any other questions? Okay, I did record this meeting, so I'll post it in case somebody didn't make the meeting or you want to look at a certain segment of it again. There's going to be things you're going to like about this. Right?
Okay, so one question. If you didn't make the meeting, how would you go back and look at the previous meeting that you didn't attend?
So I'm going to post the recording, and then you just click on the link for the recording and start it over.
Okay.
Yeah. So you can watch this or sections of this. Same with my YouTube videos for the assignment.
Thank you. Yeah, that'll be helpful.
Yeah, you can open them, replay them, pause them. So let's say you want to get a certain way in and you want me to stop, you just pause me, right? You're going to like that probably better than how we did it in class, to be honest. Yeah. I think the goal for me is to give you the same learning experience, just a different environment. So to get you through the Excel components and having you feel confident about it and being able to discuss the material. Anything else? It's really quiet around here.
Yeah, it's super quiet.
Yeah.
I don't like it.
Yeah, I don't like it either. It's going to be an interesting time. Anybody feel like they're in the twilight zone?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I have 2 boys that are approximately your age, and I'm a little concerned about their future. I'm concerned about your future. I'm old. I've already lived a long time. It's not as big a deal for me as it is for you.
Do you know if classes are going to go to pass fail or not, or are they going to stay like affecting our GPAs and stuff?
I haven't heard that it'll be pass fail.
There's a petition going around to make it pass fail. Everybody sign it.
Yeah, I just saw that in the academics group chat.
Yeah, I think that would be a tough road to hoe, to be honest.
Yeah.
I don't think that'll happen.
Like I've taken online classes before, like through like Civil 2, and it's just so much harder than actual normal classes.
It's a different way to learn, no doubt about that.
Yes.
No doubt about that. And, you know, I've taught online for 10 years, but mostly at the graduate level. And my experience is for graduate students, they really want to learn that way because they're working or they have families or whatever. For undergraduate students, it's a lot harder. And mostly because, and I think this is especially true given the conversations I've had with cadets, is that you folks came to us because you like structure, right?
Mm-hmm.
You like structure and you like an environment in which you get a lot of feedback. And sometimes the online learning environment isn't like that. So my goal is to hopefully make you feel like you're still getting the same learning experience and not feel like you're not getting enough attention. You know what I mean? I think in the end, you're going to find that you actually like some aspects of this better. And if we could do this, if we could say, well, let's maintain some of the things you liked about this when you come back, you know? Let's not give up entirely some of the benefits of doing online, because I think there are some. Like you're probably going to say to me, I wish you'd done those videos a long time ago, right? For the homework. You might say that. And that's good. So we'll all learn a lot. But I definitely miss having you guys around here. It's just not the same. It's just not the same. It's too quiet. It's weird. Anything else?
So like right now we're still doing the meeting next Monday at the same time, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
As long as everybody can make that work, I'd like to stick with it. If I get too many students that say I can't make that time, I might go to our class time. Does that sound okay?
Yeah.
All right.
Yes,
I'm
ma'am.
flexible. I'm definitely flexible. So if you feel like, you know, don't hesitate to make recommendations if you feel like there's something we could do to make it better. We can even have more online classes, but let's see how you do this week and get your feedback. If you feel like you want to meet on, you know, in person again, we can. Or if you feel like you want one on Friday to wrap things up and get any questions you have about the material answered, that's totally fine. I'm happy to do that.
Sweet.
All right, well, let's give it a go and don't, like I said, don't hesitate to give me some feedback if you feel like something could be better. So. Okay, I'll post the recording to this as soon as I can download it. It usually takes about a half an hour for it to save, and then I can upload it to the platform. And I'll just have a link over on the side called recordings, and I'll just keep lining them up in there. Okay, so for class recordings, that's what they'll be.
Sweet.
Sounds good.
All right. Have a great afternoon.
All right,
You as
thank you.
well.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Take
everyone.
care. Stay safe.
Too.
Yeah. Bye.